If you've ever thought church was the safest place on earth, let me tell you about the moment the organ had just begun to play, and his hands were already around my throat in front of God. The baptismal water hadn't even dried on the baby's forehead when 12 strangers formed a circle around me like shields. That Sunday morning at 11:15 a.m., I learned that justice doesn't arrive through prayer. It comes through evidence, recordings, and the purple bruises that finally speak louder than hymns. My name is Harper Quinn, and I used to believe that broken things could be fixed with enough love and patience. I was wrong. Before everything shattered, there were Sunday mornings on the Willamette River with my real father. The SUP board would slice through the morning mist while classic rock drifted from his beat-up Subaru parked on the shore. He'd sing off-key to Creedence Clearwater Revival, his voice bouncing off the water, mixing with the smell of sunscreen and that particular Oregon dampness that never quite leaves your clothes. I was 8, maybe 9, balanced on that board like the world itself was steady beneath my feet. The Interstate 5 pileup happened on a Tuesday at 4:37 p.m. I know the exact time because that's when our kitchen clock stopped working, as if the house itself knew. 2 state troopers stood at our door, their boots leaving wet prints on the welcome mat Douglas fir needles stuck in the treads. My mother, Elaine, collapsed right there in the doorway. Not dramatically, just a slow fold, like laundry sliding off a line. After that, our house in Eugene became a museum of silence. Mom quit her teaching job at Riverside Elementary, said the children's voices were too bright, too alive. I learned to cook spaghetti at 12, standing on a step stool to reach the stove. I walked barefoot through hallways so my footsteps wouldn't wake the grief that had moved into every room like a paying tenant. The smell of pine and rain that I'd loved became oppressive, seeping through window frames that nobody bothered to seal anymore. Roy Dalrymple arrived 9 months later, called by our neighbor Mrs. Patterson about a roof leak. He smelled like sawdust and WD-40 wore flannel even in July. His hands were steady as he explained the damage to my mother, drawing diagrams on a yellow legal pad, making everything seem fixable. He refused payment for the initial repair, said neighbors helped neighbors. Mom smiled for the first time since the funeral, just a small upturn at the corners, but I grabbed onto it like a lifeline. He fixed more than the roof, the kitchen cabinet that wouldn't close, the back gate that screamed on its hinges, the bathroom tile that had been loose since before Dad died. Each repair brought him deeper into our lives, until one evening he was staying for dinner, teaching me to use a level, showing Mom how to reset the circuit breaker. His voice filled the spaces where Dad's used to be. Different, but something rather than nothing. The proposal came on a February evening at 8:20 p.m., rain hammering the windows. He gave Mom a silver ring with a small sapphire, said it matched her eyes when she used to smile. Then he pulled out a second box, a delicate silver chain for me. "For my new daughter," he said, fastening it around my neck. His fingers lingered at my nape, and he whispered something that made my stomach turn to ice. "Your daddy's gone now. New rules in this house." Mom was too busy crying happy tears. She insisted to hear him. The necklace felt like a collar, cold against my throat. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tried to take it off, but the clasp was different from any I'd seen, requiring 2 hands at an angle I couldn't manage alone. The wedding was small, just family and a few neighbors at the courthouse. Roy's hand on Mom's back looked protective in the photos. His hand on my shoulder looked the same, but felt like a paperweight, holding me in place while the world rearranged itself around his presence. Mrs. Patterson called him a godsend. The other neighbors agreed. Mom started humming again while washing dishes, and I learned to swallow my unease like medicine, bitter but supposedly necessary. That silver chain never warmed against my skin, no matter how long I wore it. The rules started small, reasonable enough that Mom never questioned them. Bedroom doors stayed open at all times. Roy said it was for safety, in case of fire. Every receipt had to be logged in a spiral notebook he kept in the kitchen drawer, down to the penny. Financial responsibility, he called it, though he never showed us his own expenses. My part-time job at the coffee shop on Pearl Street meant nothing. Every Friday at 6 p.m. sharp. I handed over my paycheck, and he'd count it twice before sliding it into his wallet. "You'll thank me when you're older," he'd say, recording the amount in that same notebook, "teaching you not to be wasteful like your mother was before I came along." Mom would flinch at these comments but never correct him. She'd started doing that shrinking into herself whenever he spoke about our life before him, as if remembering Dad was a betrayal of this new stability Roy provided. The neighborhood BBQs were the worst. Roy would flip burgers with one hand, the other possessively on Mom's waist, telling anyone who'd listen how he'd saved us. "You should have seen this place when I first showed up." He'd laugh, beer bottles sweating in the July heat. "These two wouldn't have lasted another winter without me." Elaine here couldn't even remember to pay the electric bill. That was a lie. Mom had never missed a payment, even in her deepest grief. But she'd stand there, smile frozen, while the neighbors nodded sympathetically. I'd watch her fingers twist her wedding ring around and around, a nervous habit that started 3 months after they married. The night I won the regional essay contest about the Willamette River, my first real achievement since Dad died, should have been a celebration. The prize was $500 and publication in the Oregon Literary Review. I rushed home at 4:15 p.m., certificate clutched in my hand, to find Mom had made my favorite dinner salmon with lemon, roasted vegetables, even a chocolate cake from scratch. Roy read the essay at the table, his jaw working like he was chewing something tough. When he finished, he set it down carefully beside his plate. "Poetry and fancy words," he said slowly. "That's what you're wasting your time on. What's that going to do for you in the real world?" "It's an honor," Mom ventured quietly. "The school called," her English teacher said. "Her English teacher isn't paying the bills in this house." Roy's voice didn't rise, never did in front of me. That would come later, behind their bedroom door at 11:45 p.m., muffled but unmistakable. $500 for writing about a river. You know what I made today? Real money, from real work." He stood up, my certificate still on the table, a drop of sauce bleeding into the corner. "You can keep the prize money," he said magnanimously, like he was doing me a favor with my own achievement. "Put it towards something useful. Maybe then you'll understand value." Mom didn't defend me. She cleared the plates in silence while my cake sat untouched, candles unlit. Later, I heard her crying in the bathroom, water running to mask the sound. The next morning, there was a fresh bruise on her forearm, purple-green like the Oregon grape that grew wild in our backyard. "Bumped it on the car door," she said, pulling her sleeve down. The certificate disappeared from my room. I found it weeks later in the garage, tucked behind paint cans, water-stained and forgotten. The prize money went into Roy's notebook, recorded like everything else. Mom started wearing long sleeves in August, foundation caked under her eyes. The silver chain around my neck had turned my skin green by then, but Roy insisted I keep wearing it. "It's a symbol," he said one evening at dinner, reaching across to adjust it so the clasp faced properly backward. "Of family, of belonging." His fingers were cold against my throat, and I understood perfectly what it symbolized. It was a leash, pretty and delicate, but still designed to keep me exactly where he wanted me. The North Coast Response EMT program application sat hidden between my mattress and box spring for 3 weeks before I found the courage to fill it out. 18 years old, high school diploma still warm from the printer, and all I knew was that I needed to learn how to save people, maybe because I couldn't save the 2 I lived with. The program was based in Eugene but required residence near the training facility. Perfect. The dorms were cheap, converted from an old motel off Highway 99, but they came with a deadbolt and a key only I would hold. I forged Roy's signature on the financial aid forms at 2:30 a.m., listening for his snoring through the walls. The day I needed Mom's signature was the hardest. I found her in the garden at 10 a.m., Roy safely at a job site across town. Her hands shook as she held the pen. dirt still under her fingernails from planting tomatoes she'd never see ripen. "Emergency medical training," she read aloud, voice barely a whisper. "You'll be dealing with accidents, trauma. I'll be helping people." I interrupted. "Real help. The kind that matters." She signed it quickly, like ripping off a bandage, then grabbed my wrist. "Don't tell him until you're accepted, please." Her grip left white marks on my skin. We both knew what she was really saying. Don't tell him until it's too late to stop you. The acceptance letter came to my friend Sarah's house 6 weeks later. I moved out on a Thursday morning at 5:45 a.m., while Roy was on a job in Portland. Left a note on the kitchen table, short and factual. Mom helped me carry boxes to Sarah's borrowed truck, both of us working in efficient silence like we'd rehearsed this escape a dozen times in our minds. "I'm proud of you," she whispered against my hair, the first time she'd held me since Roy decided physical affection made people soft. She pressed something into my hand, $200 in 20s, rubber-banded tight. "From the grocery budget." He doesn't check the receipts as closely as he thinks. The EMT training was brutal and perfect. 8-hour days of procedures, protocols, and practiced calm in manufactured chaos. My instructor, Marcus Chin, had 20 years of experience and a simple philosophy: control what you can, accept what you can't, and always know the difference. But it was Nova Hale who taught me how to breathe again. She was 25, had been running ambulance calls for 3 years, and could intubate a patient in the back of a moving vehicle without breaking a sweat. She found me crying in the supply closet after my first pediatric trauma simulation, handed me a paper towel, and said, "Steady hands, steady mind, steady heart," in that order. We became partners by week 6. She never asked about the green marks around my neck from the chain I'd finally cut off with bolt cutters, or why I flinched when male instructors corrected my form. Instead, she taught me how to read scenes, the difference between an accident and an assault, which bruises were fresh and which were weeks old, how to document everything without judgment but with precision. "Every detail matters," she said one night during a 12-hour shift at 3:20 a.m., teaching me to photograph injuries for reports. "You never know which piece of evidence will matter most later." My first real call was a domestic violence case. The woman had a split lip and was insisting she'd fallen. Her husband hovered nearby, helpful and concerned, reminding her how clumsy she'd been lately. I recognized the choreography immediately, the same dance Mom and Roy performed for neighbors, doctors, anyone who might ask questions. While Nova handled the medical assessment, I sat beside the woman and quietly recited the resources available, sliding a card with the domestic violence hotline into her jacket pocket while checking her blood pressure. Her eyes met mine for just a moment, recognition passing between us like a secret handshake among survivors. "You're going to be okay," I told her, meaning it as both a promise and a prophecy. That night in my dorm room, door locked and checked twice. I called Mom for the first time in a month. Roy answered, his voice controlled but tight. "Your mother's not available." "Is she okay?" "She's fine. We're all fine here without you." The emphasis on "without" was sharp enough to draw blood. "But you should know. Actions have consequences. Running away doesn't change what you are, a selfish little girl who abandoned her mother when she needed you most." I hung up. Nova was at my door within minutes. She'd heard my side of the conversation through the thin walls. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me on the narrow bed while I learned how to breathe through the guilt and fear. "Steady hands," she reminded me. The rest follows. By the end of the program, I could run trauma scenes, perform CPR for extended periods, and remain calm when others panicked. I kept my apartment key on a lanyard around my neck, the weight of it a daily reminder that I had a space Roy couldn't enter, a door he couldn't demand stay open. The first call came 11 months after I'd left. Mom's voice, thin as paper, whispering while water ran in the background, the same trick she'd used years ago to mask her crying. "Harper, can you hear me? Mom, are you okay? Where's—" "He's in the garage." Her words tumbled fast, practiced. "I just wanted to hear your voice. You sound good, strong. Before I could respond, I heard the garage door grinding open. The water stopped. I have to go. Wrong number. Sorry. The line went dead. I stared at my phone until the screen went dark, my hands shaking like I was 18 again instead of 23 with 5 years of emergency medicine under my belt. Nova found me sitting on the apartment's fire escape at 2:15, still holding the phone. She called, was all I said. And he's still there, in the background, like a cancer you can hear spreading. The Christmas photo came through Facebook a week later, posted by my aunt. Mom wore a red sweater with a high collar, but I could see the yellow-green shadow along her temple, expertly covered with foundation but betrayed by the camera flash. Roy's hand on her shoulder, possessive as always. The comments below were all about what a lovely couple they made. I drove back to Eugene that January, unannounced. The house looked smaller, paint peeling near the gutters Dad would have never let deteriorate. Mom's garden was winter dead, tomato cages left standing like skeletons. Roy's truck wasn't there a calculated risk that paid off. She answered the door in a bathrobe at 1:30 p.m., though she'd always been dressed by 7 when I was young. The surprise on her face shifted quickly to fear. You can't be here. Mom, please, just look at this. I pulled out the domestic violence resource card, the same kind I'd given to dozens of women on calls. There are shelters, legal aid, people who can help. She took the card like it might explode, shoving it deep in her robe pocket. You don't understand. He knows people. He does work for half the police force, their homes, their personal projects. Who would believe me? I would. I do. A truck engine rumbled down the street. Not Roy's, but she flinched anyway. You need to leave. Please, Harper. If he finds you here, what will he do? I was angry now. Years of professional calm cracking. Hit you again, break something else. He doesn't. She stopped, the lie dying on her lips. We both knew what he did. I left, but not before seeing what had replaced Dad's photo above the fireplace Roy's hunting trophies. A deer head with glass eyes that seemed to follow movement. Mom watched me notice, shame coloring her cheeks darker than any bruise. The stalking started subtle. 3 weeks after my visit, I found a Marlboro red cigarette butt near my apartment window Roy's brand, the one he thought made him look like a cowboy. A week later, an anonymous email with a photo attachment the old treehouse Dad built, now painted with a red X. The word abandoned spray-painted across the planks. My work schedule, which varied week to week, suddenly seemed known to him. Calls to the station asking for me specifically, hanging up when transferred. My car tires deflated not slashed, nothing that obvious. Just flat enough to make me late, make me anxious, make me aware he was watching. File a report, Nova insisted, documenting everything with her phone. Build a case. But I knew how this worked. I'd seen it too many times on calls. The system that was supposed to protect people had gaps wide enough for men like Roy to slip through, especially men who fixed cops' kitchen cabinets and never left visible marks where uniforms would show. The rain was coming down hard the morning I found the silver chain in my mailbox, the one I'd cut off 5 years ago. It was polished, clasp repaired, coiled like a snake ready to strike. No note, but the message was clear. You still belong to me. I held it up to the gray Oregon light, rain streaming down my windows, and made a decision. If Roy wanted to play games, I'd learned a few of my own. Emergency medicine had taught me about pressure points, both physical and psychological, about documentation, about waiting for exactly the right moment to act. What are you thinking? Nova asked, watching me wrap the chain in an evidence bag, labeled with date and time. I'm thinking about that baptism next month. Mom's side of the family, the one Roy has to attend to keep up appearances. And I'm thinking 12 witnesses in a church might be enough to finally end this. The rain kept falling, but for the first time in years, it sounded like possibility instead of prison bars. 3 layers of protection, Nova said, spreading the equipment across my kitchen table like surgical instruments. Recording, witnesses, and legal precedent. He won't see it coming. The brooch was smaller than a quarter, designed to look like vintage costume jewelry, a silver butterfly with tiny rhinestones. The camera lens was hidden in the body, virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Nova had borrowed it from her cousin who worked in insurance fraud investigation. "Pin it high on your dress," she instructed, testing the angle on her phone. "Chest level. It needs to catch his face if he gets close." The second piece was more personal, a delicate microphone that would replace the chain Roy had sent. It looked like a simple silver necklace, but the pendant contained a recorder that could capture clear audio within 10 feet. The irony wasn't lost on me, wearing his symbol of control, transformed into my tool of liberation. "What about the witnesses?" I asked, watching Nova sync the devices to her cloud storage. "Already handled." She pulled up a photo on her phone, the St. Bartholomew choir group. "My Aunt Marie sings with them, 12 members, all between 40 and 70, all mothers or grandmothers. I told them enough. They'll be watching. And if he doesn't do anything, if he plays perfect family man..." Nova looked at me steadily. "Harper, men like Roy can't help themselves. The venue threatens him all those people, you being there without his permission. He'll snap. The question is whether we're ready when he does." The legal preparation was meticulous. We documented everything: the stalking, the cigarette butts, the vandalized treehouse, the chain in my mailbox. My lawyer pro bono through the Domestic Violence Coalition had filed for a temporary protection order based on the threats. It was pending. Judge's decision expected any day. "The beauty is," she explained over the phone at 4:45 p.m., "if he violates it at the church, that's immediate grounds for arrest, especially with witnesses and recordings. The hardest part was recruiting our inside man. Officer Daniel Morrison attended St. Bartholomew, worked patrol on weekends, and most importantly, had never hired Roy for home repairs. Nova's Aunt Marie approached him after evening service, explaining just enough. He agreed to attend the baptism in plain clothes, sitting in the back row. I can't act unless something happens, he'd warned through Marie. But if it does, I'll be ready. The baptism was February 15th at 11 a.m. My cousin's baby, sweet little James, would be the guest of honor. The whole maternal side would be there, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since before Roy entered our lives. Mom had called me Thursday night, Roy audibly drunk in the background. "You're coming, aren't you?" Her voice held a desperate edge. "The family keeps asking." "Yes," I said simply. "He'll be there." A warning, not a threat. "I know." Silence stretched between us, filled with everything we couldn't say. Then, so quietly, I almost missed it. "Be careful." Saturday night, Nova and I ran through the plan one more time. She'd be in the congregation, positioned to see both me and the door. The choir would process in at 10:55 a.m., already briefed on our hand signals. If I touched my collarbone, the old nervous gesture from childhood, they'd know to move closer. If I raised my hymnal above chest height, they'd form a barrier. "What if he brings friends other people he works for?" I asked, sudden doubt creeping in. "Then we have it all on video," Nova replied. "Multiple angles if the church security cameras are working. Marie confirmed they were updated last year." I picked up the butterfly brooch, turning it in the light. Such a small thing to carry such weight. "You know what he whispered to me. That night he gave me the first chain." Nova waited. "New rules in this house. Like Dad dying meant everything before didn't count. Like he could just rewrite our entire history." "Well," Nova said, checking the battery life on the recording devices one final time. "He was half right. There are new rules now. He just doesn't know we're the ones who wrote them." The protection order came through Monday morning at 9:20 a.m., 3 days before the baptism. Perfect timing. The judge had granted it based on the documented pattern of stalking and threats. Roy would be served Tuesday 48 hours before we'd all be in that church together. "When he's served, he'll be angry," my lawyer warned. He might escalate before the baptism. Good, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Let him show everyone who he really is. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing pinning the brooch at different angles. The butterfly's wings caught the light, delicate but unbreakable, just like the plan, just like me. This Sunday, I told my reflection, everything changes. The organ's first notes floated through St. Bartholomew at 10:55 a.m. Bach's prelude in C major filling the vaulted ceiling with deceptive peace. I stood near the baptismal font, my cousin's baby James warm in my arms, his christening gown pristine white against my navy dress. The butterfly brooch caught the stained glass light, wings shimmering. The church was packed. Extended family filled the front pews, their Sunday best creating a sea of pastels and navy. The choir, 12 strong, had positioned themselves strategically throughout the congregation instead of in their usual loft, Marie's suggestion. Nova sat 3 rows back on the aisle, hymnal in hand, eyes tracking the entrance. Mom arrived at 11:05, alone. She wore the green dress I'd sent her for Christmas, the one with the high neckline that covered everything. Her eyes found mine across the sanctuary, a flash of warning before she looked away. She knew. The smell hit before I saw him whiskey-masked with cologne, cigarette smoke clinging to wool. Roy entered at 11:12, late enough to make an entrance, his steps unsteady but trying to project control. His suit was new, too sharp for a baptism, like armor. His bloodshot eyes swept the church and locked onto me. I adjusted baby James, feeling the familiar weight of the microphone pendant against my chest. Recording everything. The priest, Father Michael, beckoned the family forward. I walked toward the font, each step measured, peripheral vision tracking Roy as he pushed into our family's pew, forcing Mom's cousin to shift down. "Who brings this child to be baptized?" Father Michael intoned. "We do," the parents responded. Roy's voice cut through the sacred moment, a harsh whisper that carried, "Playing house with someone else's baby." Typical. Mom's hand fluttered to her throat. 3 choir members shifted closer, casual but deliberate. Nova's knuckles whitened on her hymnal. The prayers continued. I handed James to his mother for the blessing, then stepped back toward the family pews. That's when Roy grabbed my wrist, his fingers vice-tight, pulling me down toward the empty space beside him. "Sit," he hissed, bourbon breath hot against my ear. "Stop making a spectacle of yourself." "Let go!" I kept my voice level, clear. The microphone would catch every word. "You don't give orders here." His grip tightened, thumb pressing into the tendons. "Walking around like you belong. You're nothing without family. Nothing without—" I touched my collarbone, the signal. 6 choir members stood simultaneously, their movement drawing attention. Father Michael paused mid-prayer. Roy's eyes darted around, realizing people were watching. "Is everything all right?" Father Michael asked, his voice carrying pastoral concern with an edge of warning. "Fine, Father," Roy replied, but his fingers only dug deeper. "Just a family matter." I stood, forcing him to either release me or make it obvious he was restraining me. He chose violence. His other hand shot up, grabbing my throat, fingers finding the chain of the microphone like muscle memory. The slap came next sharp, loud, echoing off stone walls. The church erupted, not in chaos, but in purposeful movement. 12 choir members surrounded us in seconds, their bodies forming a protective circle. Nova was already on her phone. Officer Morrison pushed through the crowd. Badge out. Off-duty service weapon visible. "Sir, step away from her. Now!" Roy's face contorted with rage. "You don't know who I am. I've fixed half your colleagues' houses. This is my family." "No," I said, my voice steady despite his fingers still at my throat. "We're not—" His grip tightened for one more second, enough for the brooch camera to capture his face, twisted with fury. Enough for 30 witnesses to see him choose violence in God's house. Then Morrison was there, pulling Roy's arms behind his back, the click of handcuffs sharp as communion wine. "Roy Dalrymple, you're under arrest for assault in violation of a protection order." "What protection order?" Spittle flew from his mouth. "So, this is my stepdaughter, who filed an order that was served to you 3 days ago," Morrison continued, professional and calm, "which you've just violated in front of numerous witnesses." The organ had stopped. Baby James was crying. Mom stood frozen in the pew, one hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in years, she wasn't looking at Roy. She was looking at me. "It's over, Mom," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough for the recording. "He can't hurt us anymore." Roy lunged against Morrison's grip, his face purple with rage. "You planned this, you little—" "That's enough," Father Michael commanded, his voice carrying divine authority. "This is a house of God, and you've defiled it with violence." The choir began to sing not a hymn, but something spontaneous, wordless, their voices creating a wall of sound that drowned out Roy's cursing as Morrison led him toward the side exit. Their bodies remained around me, these strangers who'd become shields, these mothers who understood without being told. Nova appeared at my elbow, already pulling up the uploaded footage on her phone. "Crystal clear," she whispered. "Audio and video. He's done." The Sunday school room smelled like crayons and old coffee, transformed into an impromptu police station. Officer Morrison sat across from me at a child-sized table, his notebook out, writing everything in careful block letters. The butterfly brooch lay between us, still recording. Evidence. "We'll need the footage from both devices," he said, professional despite the Noah's Ark mural behind him. The church security cameras caught multiple angles. Father Michael's already agreed to provide copies. Nova worked her phone beside me, uploading files to 3 different clouds. 14 minutes of clear audio before the assault. Every threat, every word. She pulled up a waveform on her screen. "This part at 11:17, he admits to stalking her. I know where you live, what shifts you work." Morrison's pen stopped. "He said that in church. He thought the organ would cover it," I said. My throat ached where his fingers had pressed, 5 distinct points already purpling. "He didn't know about the microphone." The door opened. Mom entered, supported by my Aunt Patricia, her face pale but determined. She sat down carefully, pulled a small notebook from her purse, worn pages, dates going back 3 years. "I started documenting after Harper left," she said quietly. "Every incident, every threat, every time her voice cracked. I was too scared to use it, but not anymore." Morrison flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. "This is extensive. Why didn't you come forward? He fixed Detective Coleman's bathroom last year, Sergeant Riley's deck the year before. He'd brag about it, about knowing things whose marriage was failing, who was drinking too much." Mom's fingers twisted her wedding ring. "He made sure I knew he had connections." "Those connections won't help him now," Morrison said. "Too many witnesses, too much evidence. The protection order violation alone is mandatory jail time." Through the window, we could see the parking lot where Roy sat in the patrol car, his face a mask of rage behind the glass. 2 more units had arrived. Morrison had called for backup to ensure everything was handled perfectly. No procedural errors Roy's lawyer might exploit. "The audio's been uploaded to the prosecutor's cloud," Nova announced. "Time-stamped, authenticated. The assault happens at 11:21 and 14 seconds. I pulled up my phone, showing Morrison the emails. "These are from the past month, anonymous, but I had them traced they came from IP addresses connected to job sites he was working." Each message was worse than the last. Descriptions of what he'd do when he got me alone. Photos of my apartment building. One just said, "You can't hide forever," repeated 57 times. "This establishes pattern of harassment." Morrison said, "Premeditation." This wasn't a momentary loss of control he planned to confront you. Father Michael knocked and entered, still in his vestments. The family wants to know if they should continue with the baptism. I looked at Mom. For the first time in years, she made a decision without checking over her shoulder first. Yes, she said firmly. Roy's taken enough from this family. He doesn't get to ruin this day, too. Father Michael nodded. The choirs offered to stay, to stand with you both. As he left, a woman I didn't recognize entered mid-50s, professional blazer, kind eyes. I'm Linda from the domestic violence response team. Hospital called me. She knelt beside Mom's chair. We have a bed at the safe house if you need it. Emergency protection orders for both of you. Resources for what comes next. What comes next is I testify, Mom said, surprising everyone, including herself. Whatever Harper recorded, whatever witnesses saw, it's not enough. I need to tell them everything. The financial abuse, the isolation, She pulled back her sleeve, revealing old scars I'd never seen. Thin white lines like tally marks. All of it. Morrison closed his notebook. With what we have, he's looking at multiple charges: assault, violation of protection order, harassment, stalking. The domestic violence enhancement means mandatory minimum sentences. Through it all, the brooch kept recording. Every word of Mom's courage, every detail of evidence compiled. The exact time, 12:43 p.m., when she finally said, I want to press charges. For everything. Nova pulled up one more file. Harper, listen to this. From right before he grabbed you. Roy's voice, crystal clear through her phone speaker. She thinks she's free, but I own her mother, which means I own her. They're mine until I say otherwise. Morrison took the phone, replaying it twice. Possession language indicates ongoing control beliefs. The prosecutor will use this to argue for maximum sentencing. The patrol car's engine started outside, Roy being transported to booking. Through the window, I watched him leave, not in his truck with country music blaring, but in custody, his control finally broken. The chain, I said suddenly, pulling the microphone necklace over my head. He sent me the original chain last week. It's in evidence bags at my apartment. We'll collect it, Morrison assured me. Every piece matters. Mom reached for my hand the first time she'd touched me voluntarily in Roy's presence in years. Her grip was firm, no longer trembling. It's really over, she whispered. No, I corrected, squeezing back. It's finally beginning. I lifted the microphone necklace from the evidence table. Its weight different now, no longer a chain, but a key that had unlocked our freedom. Beside it lay the butterfly brooch, wings still catching light, and the original silver chain Roy had fastened around my neck all those years ago. 3 objects, 3 chapters: imprisonment, deception, and finally, liberation. The baptismal font stood empty now, the holy water long since blessed baby James's forehead. The church had quieted to just us, Mom, Nova, and the 12 choir members who'd stood as our shields. Through the stained glass windows, afternoon light painted colors across the floor where Roy's shoes had scraped as Morrison dragged him away. I set the original chain on the wooden table beside the font. This is where it belonged, not thrown away in anger or kept as a reminder, but laid down deliberately in a place of transformation. The same water that blessed new life had witnessed our rebirth. Harper. Shh, Mom's voice was different, like she was remembering how to speak at full volume. Look. She pulled something from her pocket, the domestic violence resource card I'd given her that January day. Soft from handling, edges worn from being hidden and retrieved countless times. I read it every night after he fell asleep, memorized the hotline number. I was just waiting. For what? For you to show me it was possible. She looked at the choir members. Officer Morrison filling out final forms. Nova organizing evidence files. You didn't just escape. You built an army. Marie from the choir stepped forward, her silver hair catching light like a halo. We all have our stories, she said simply. Some of us escaped. Some of us helped others escape. Today, we got to be the village that shows up, one by one. The choir members nodded at us, no words needed, just acknowledgement between survivors and witnesses. They filed out slowly, leaving us with the echoes of their earlier song, that wordless hymn that had drowned out Roy's curses. Nova held up her phone one last time. Everything's backed up, cloud, hard drive, and the prosecutor's office. He can't deny any of it. Through the side door, I could see the spot where the patrol car had parked. Roy was being processed now, fingerprints. Mugshot. The orange jumpsuit replacing his sharp suit. By the time he made bail, if he made bail, the protection orders would be permanent. His construction connections couldn't build him a bridge back to us. Mom slipped off her wedding ring, examined it like an artifact from another life. Without ceremony, she dropped it into the pour box by the door. The metal clinked against coins transformed from a shackle to charity, something that might actually help someone. Father Michael returned as we prepared to leave. The family completed the baptism. Little James is officially welcomed into the community. He paused, choosing words carefully. As are you both. Whenever you're ready. Outside, the Oregon rain had started again, that persistent mist that makes everything clean. Mom and I stood under the church awning, neither of us moving toward our separate cars just yet. I'm going to sell the house, she said suddenly. Too many ghosts. The garden's dead anyway. Where will you go? She almost smiled. Somewhere with new soil, maybe closer to the coast. I always loved the sound of waves. The parking lot was emptying, families heading to baptism lunches, normal Sunday routines resuming. In a few hours, the only evidence of what happened here would be police reports and digital files, the testimony of witnesses, and the fading bruises on my throat that would photograph purple-black for court. Roy's truck still sat in the far corner of the lot, waiting for a tow. Someone had left a pink parking violation on the windshield, overtime limit exceeded. Even the universe, it seemed, was done with his presence here. Harper, Mom said as we finally walked toward our cars. That thing he used to say about new rules. I nodded. He was right, just backward. There are new rules now. We write them. I watched her drive away, following her taillights until they disappeared into the Oregon mist. Nova waited by my car, patient as always. You okay? I touched my throat where the bruises were forming. 5 distinct fingerprints that would become evidence photos, then fade, then disappear entirely. But the recording would remain. The witnesses would remember. The system, finally, would work. Yeah, I said, meaning it completely for the first time in 17 years. I'm okay. The butterfly brooch caught the light one more time as I unpinned it from my dress. Its job complete. Sometimes salvation comes through prayer. Sometimes it comes through careful planning, hidden cameras, and 12 strangers willing to stand between you and the violence you've always known was coming. Today, in a small church in Eugene, Oregon, it came through both. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're hearing this, what city, what country, what time of day you've chosen to witness this truth. Please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Your stories matter too. And sometimes the comment section becomes its own kind of sanctuary, where survivors recognize each other across distances we'll never physically cross. Stay strong, and remember the chains that bind us can become the keys that free us.